by far the one team that has been most surprised in 3 games into the season is the Utah Jazz, who are currently undefeated, who have not been terrible defensively. And just it turns out that like having a team full of a whole bunch of just solid veteran players who know how to play basketball and know how to defend on an NBA court and fit into a system can actually work surprisingly well.
Yeah, I did not see them crush Denver. I think I missed the first quarter of the Minnesota game, and then I tuned in and we were losing to Utah, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. What a horrible start for the Timberwolves. And then I was watching and I was just like, I don't like, I'm not comfortable just blaming this on our defense. Like, I think the Utah Jazz just look good. And
They do.
and it stayed that way for the whole rest of the game. They beat the Timberwolves in a close and exciting game, and then they just beat the New Orleans Pelicans. And I watched all that game, and it was more of the same. Like, they play super aggressive, they pass a lot, they have a ton of shooting, and then they've got a couple of really interesting defensive impact guys that are making a huge difference. Like, they've unleashed Jared Vanderbilt. It feels just like the beginning of last season with the Timberwolves, and Jared Vanderbilt was just grabbing every offensive rebound in sight and getting a whole bunch of steals and just sort of like making all these hustle plays and making a huge difference. Walker Kessler is a legit rim protector with surprisingly
Yeah.
good mobility. And yeah, this Utah Jazz team is just super fun.
And I think Lauri Markkanen has been the main standout. I mean, he's currently leading the team in scoring. He has not found his 3-point shot so far this season, but everything inside the arc is going in.
I think
He had
that's when
that
you get the most
really,
excited. When the
yeah,
guy's not even on fire. Like, sometimes the guy's like, yeah, he's averaging 25 points per game, but like he's not going to keep shooting like this from three. When you see someone like Markkanen who's not even like shooting his career average from three and is still like dominating, and you see
really
him attacking
getting
the bucket
buckets.
super hard, and like he looks great. He's played great on defense too. He played good defense last year for the Cavs too. People kind of slept on that a little bit, that he kind of flexed a little bit more to his game in a smaller role.
With Lauri Markkanen, he had that game clinching shot against your Timberwolves where he just kind of drove into the lane and just kind of like tossed up a mid range jumper. And
Yeah.
he's playing with confidence right now. Those things are going in. And Jordan Clarkson has also looked really good. I mean, he's
Jordan Clarkson
19 a
was
game
killing
right
us. Oh
now
my
and
God. Like,
on efficient scoring. And he's been starting and playing the starters minutes and not necessarily like a role we've seen him in since his Lakers days, but
yeah,
yeah,
he's
just like
passing the ball
really,
really well too. He's been a very
really
like,
looking good.
he's not like, I mean, he's had great games for the Jazz before, but in this very like gunner role, he's still gunning. He's still absolutely getting those shots up, but he's playing into a he's playing within the team scheme. He's making a lot of great passes. He's setting guys up. He just looks like an excellent offensive player. I think the guy that's getting a bit undersung here is Kelly Olynyk. It's just, Kelly Olynyk is one of those guys who's been hanging out in the NBA on a variety of different teams, like, good and bad, and he's always actually been like low key a like offensive floor raiser. If
Yeah.
putting Kelly Olynyk in a lineup is a thing that boosts offenses, because he's a really good passer and he's a really good shooter and he's kind of crafty. So obviously there's other parts of his game that, maybe don't make him the best part of a championship level lineup. I mean, put him on this Jazz team, and he's shooting 75% from three, and getting his hands on 1.7 steals, and just like, yeah, can't miss. And he passes the ball well. He's really smart. He's a good cutter. He's a funky player. You must have watched him. Did you watch him in college?
Oh yeah, Gonzaga. He was a very different player in Gonzaga, much more of a low post threat.
Yeah.
He really expanded. I mean, he had a nice mid range jumper at Gonzaga too, but he really expanded his perimeter game upon entering the NBA, which I think has been great for his career because he was a positive contributor for the Heat for a long time. He has been solid on the Pistons last couple of years, and just continues to just be like a good plus offensive player now for the Jazz. And the one thing that's surprised me with the Jazz, because like we all know the front office, we imagine at least, wants to be committed to the tank. But Will Hardy, the Jazz's new coach, is not interested in any of that. He's just playing his best two-way players a ton of minutes. The young guys are not seeing the floor. I think it's
Except for
kind of
Walker
interesting that
Kessler.
except for Walker Kessler, who has been a positive defensive player. And I think that's why he's seen the floor. But,
Yeah.
Colin Sexton's minutes has been limited, which is a little bit surprising. Perhaps it's coming off of the injury as part of that. But, Colin Sexton is kind of like an undersized guard who's feisty defensively, but not necessarily an awesome player, and has been pretty inefficient scoring the ball so far this season. But like his minutes are limited, so his potential negative impact on the game has also been limited. So it's just interesting. The Jazz are like really playing to win early on in this year.
I'm surprised to see Malik Beasley getting more minutes than Colin Sexton throughout these 3 games, but I'm not that surprised that one of these guards has, fallen down the rotation a little bit, like, Taylor Horton Tucker, even more so. Like, we knew going into this that, like, they've got Conley, they've got Clarkson, they got Beasley, they got Sexton, they've got Horton Tucker, they've got Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Like, that's just a lot of guards competing for like a very similar kind of role. So, I mean, Sexton isn't like out of the rotation at this point. Like, he's still playing close to 20 minutes a game, and I think he'll get opportunities to seize a bigger role. But it's like that's the one spot in the Jazz where it's pretty competitive in their backcourt.
Yeah, and I think when we did our kind of preseason stuff on the Jazz, we were projecting them to really emphasize development and playing these young guys, and we're saying like, yeah, they'll just throw THT out there, they'll throw Agbaji out there, like
Yeah.
they'll focus on development. That has not been the case so far. So if they're interested in continuing in the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes, I mean, they can certainly unload some of these veteran players for picks and or young players. But depending on when they do that, like if they hold off till the trade deadline to make any moves, this could be, the best out of those, bottom 5 or 6 teams in the West. It would be a little bit surprising to see them, make the play-in tournament. I think we're still expecting them to be bottom 5, but like one of the better bottom 5 teams.
I mean, they're going to have to do something to make themselves bottom 5. I mean, I'm not going to overreact to 3 games too much, but I think we, wrote them off because we saw this lack of direction, and the players on the team just felt random. But now that the smoke has cleared a little bit, like 6, 7, 8, 9 veterans on this team who are all quality NBA rotation players, that's not actually the best path to tanking. I'm like, we're both on the record saying that we thought the Utah Jazz were going to be the, worst team in the NBA, but like, and everyone felt that, but we're getting a little bit. I feel like we deserve this as a collective NBA fandom and media to be like, well, like their personnel wasn't actually that bad. And when you talk about them playing, for development, like the Jazz are a step behind in their rebuild from like, the Thunders and the Rockets of the world, where they don't have the pool of young talent yet. You can't build lineups out of Baji and Kessler. There's just not very many guys like they've got only 1, 2, 3, 4 guys 22 or younger. Jared Vanderbilt's 23, and then it's like then you start getting into like veteran territory. So like this next year is about them acquiring young players and picks, or so we all assume. I mean, I still assume that nothing about these 3 games changes that at all. But I think what Lauri Markkanen and company are showing is like, well, if you put us out there on the floor every night, like we're going to try to win games, and we're not trash into the roster pieces. Like we're all players who have started in the NBA, and you're going to put, and Walker Kessler's pretty good already. So we've got a functional NBA rotation. So Danny Ainge, it's your move. If you want to get back in the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes, like you gotta mess these guys up. It's a good problem to have, because that means that a lot of these guys who had very little trade value might have trade value right now. And I could totally see someone being like, oh, you know what? Kelly Olynyk as a addition to the front court does change my team's playoff chances. And Lauri Markkanen, I do think differently about him than I thought about him 2 weeks ago. So I think we might see Danny Ainge act really fast, but I don't know. We're kind of in uncharted territory here.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's interesting is perhaps we're seeing the flattening of the lottery odds work. I think there's been quite a bit of hand-wringing this offseason about like, oh, we have this draft with 2 generational talents in it potentially. And even though we've had these rule changes to the lottery, none of it matters. Everyone's just going to tank anyway. The tanking problem has never been worse. Like panic, panic. It's time for Adam Silver to do something. But like, there's also the possibility that Danny Ainge is seeing this through like it's going to be really hard to get to the bottom of the league. Like it would require a complete overhaul of the team, and it's difficult logistically to make that many trades after the NBA season has already begun. So like instead of trying to finish at the very bottom for only a 14% chance of the number one pick, perhaps we just take the 5 or 6% chance at the number one pick from being kind of like a mid lottery team and have pieces that we can unload at the trade deadline or in the off season and achieve some value there. That is, I think, a perfectly legitimate way to start a rebuild.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. And I do think the lottery odds actually have functioned. You'll still see teams acting pretty desperately. But what we have this year is we have 8 really great teams in each conference that are going to be fighting to try to win a championship. And it's not going to get very much better than that ever. Like there's just that's consistent across every sports league. Like you don't get much deeper of a league than that. So I don't really care if there's 4 non-competitive teams in each conference that are not doing their darndest to rack up victories.
Inevitably, you're going to have some bad teams, regardless of whether they're trying to be bad or not. It's just going to happen. This isn't the NFL. It's a league very much driven by star talent, and therefore parity is never going to be attainable.